Step into the quiet sandstone canyons of Mesa Verde, where the famous cliff dwellings rise like ancient cities hidden beneath the cliffs.
In the vast, sun-drenched landscape of the American Southwest, where the borders of 4 states meet, lies a place of quiet mystery and profound beauty. This is Mesa Verde, the Green Table, a sprawling plateau carved by time into a labyrinth of deep canyons and towering mesas. Imagine standing here, the air crisp and still, the silence broken only by the whisper of wind through pinyon pine and juniper trees. The cliffs around you glow with a warm red light, a testament to millions of years of geological history. This land is more than just a stunning natural wonder. It's a silent storyteller. Tucked into the protective alcoves of these canyons are some of the most spectacular and well-preserved archaeological sites in North America. Elaborate stone villages, built right into the cliff faces, stand as a haunting tribute to the ingenuity of the Ancestral Pueblo people who called this place home for over 700 years. They were farmers, artisans, astronomers, and community builders who created a thriving civilization in this challenging environment. From humble pit houses on the mesa tops to the sophisticated multi-story dwellings like Cliff Palace and Balcony House, we can trace their journey. They cultivated corn, beans, and squash on the flatlands above, hunted in the forests, and gathered water from seeps in the rock. Their pottery, decorated with intricate black-on-white designs, tells us of their artistic spirit. Their kivas, the subterranean ceremonial chambers, speak to a rich spiritual life that connected them deeply to the earth and the cosmos. For centuries, life here flourished. But then, around the year 1300, something changed. After generations of building, farming, and raising families in these canyon strongholds, they left. Not in a rush, not as if fleeing a sudden disaster, but in a deliberate, organized migration. They'd packed their most valuable belongings, sealed doorways, and walked away from the only homes they had ever known, never to return. And this is the central, captivating question of Mesa Verde. Why? Why did an entire society abandon a home they had invested so much in? There are no written records left behind, only the silent stones and the clues they hold. Was it conflict? Environmental change? A great drought, often called the Great Drought of the late 13th century, is a leading theory. Tree ring data from ancient wooden beams shows a period of severe and prolonged dryness that would have devastated their crops and dried up their water sources. Imagine the struggle of trying to feed a large population when the rains simply stopped coming. Or perhaps the reasons were more complex. Some archaeologists suggest that after centuries of farming, the soil on the mesas became depleted. The forests, which provided fuel and building materials, may have been over-harvested. This resource depletion, combined with the drought, could have created a perfect storm of environmental stress. Life in the canyons, once a source of security, might have become unsustainable. Then there's the social dimension. Could internal strife or conflict with neighboring groups have played a role? While the cliff dwellings seem defensive, evidence for widespread warfare is scarce. It's more likely that social and religious factors were at play. Perhaps a new spiritual belief or a powerful prophecy led them to seek a new home. The migration might not have been seen as an abandonment, but as a fulfillment of a cultural or religious destiny, a journey to a new world. The descendants of the Mesa Verde people, the modern Pueblo tribes of Arizona and New Mexico, hold their own histories. Their oral traditions speak of migrations, of journeys guided by spiritual leaders in search of the center place. To them, their ancestors didn't vanish. They simply moved on, continuing a journey that is a fundamental part of their story. Their path led them south and east, to the places where Pueblo communities thrive today, like the Hopi Mesas and the villages along the Rio Grande. So as we begin our journey into this incredible place, we're not just looking at empty ruins. We are stepping into a profound human story. We'll explore these incredible structures, walking the same paths the ancestral Puebloans walked. We'll look at the evidence they left behind, the pottery, the tools, the architecture, and try to piece together the puzzle of their lives and their ultimate departure. This isn't a story of a lost civilization, but a story of resilience, adaptation, and a journey that continues to this day. Join me as we delve deep into the canyons of Mesa Verde, to listen to the whispers of the past and uncover the secrets held within these stone walls. We'll explore the daily life, the spiritual world, and the monumental achievements of the people who created a masterpiece in the cliffs, only to leave it to the silence of the canyons. Let's start our exploration and see what mysteries we can unravel together. Thank you for watching, and if you're fascinated by ancient histories and unsolved mysteries, be sure to subscribe and follow along. Welcome back to our journey through time. Last time we marveled at the incredible cliff dwellings. But have you ever wondered who lived on this land thousands of years before those villages were built? Let's rewind the clock, way back to a time we call the land before the villages. Our story begins over 10,000 years ago during the Paleoindian period. Imagine a landscape recovering from the last ice age. Small, nomadic groups of people, true pioneers, roamed this land. They were master hunters, trekking massive animals like mammoths and ancient bison. Their lives were a constant migration, following the herds and the changing seasons. The evidence they left behind is sparse, a beautifully crafted spear point, a forgotten campsite, but these artifacts tell a story of resilience and deep knowledge of a wild, untamed world. They didn't build permanent homes. Their home was the entire landscape. As the climate warmed and the giant mammals disappeared, the people adapted. This marks the beginning of the Archaic period around 8,000 years ago. Life shifted from big game hunting to a more diverse strategy. These archaic hunter-gatherers were like encyclopedias of the natural world. They knew every plant, every animal, every season. They harvested wild seeds, nuts, and berries, and hunted smaller game like deer, rabbits, and bighorn sheep. They moved with the land's rhythm, spending summers in the cooler highlands and winters in the warmer, lower canyons. Instead of just one or two big hunts, their survival depended on hundreds of small, successful decisions every single day. They developed new tools to match this lifestyle, like grinding stones called manos and metates, to process tough seeds and grains into flour. They wove intricate baskets from plant fibers so well made that some could even hold water. These weren't just tools. They were expressions of artistry and ingenuity. The archaic people didn't just survive on the land. They thrived with it, building a relationship based on respect and deep understanding that would last for millennia. For thousands of years, this mobile foraging lifestyle was the norm. But change was coming, quietly, carried on the wind. It arrived in the form of a tiny seed, maize, or what we know as corn. The introduction of maize from what is now Mexico was not an overnight revolution. It was a very, very slow burn. At first, maize was just one of many plants these foragers used. It was likely a small, grassy plant, not the robust cobs we see today. Early farmers would plant a small patch, then continue their seasonal rounds of hunting and gathering, returning months later to see what had grown. Think of it as a supplemental food source, an experiment. It wasn't reliable enough to completely abandon the tried and true methods of foraging. But over centuries, something incredible happened. The people began to select seeds from the strongest, most productive plants. They became some of the world's earliest geneticists, slowly transforming maize into a more dependable crop. This gradual process of domestication was a two-way street. As the people changed the corn began to change the people. As maize became a more significant part of their diet, the need to stay close to their fields grew. This led to a subtle but profound shift. People started to stay in one place for longer periods. They began building more substantial shelters, pits dug into the earth and covered with a framework of wood and mud. These pit houses were the first steps toward a more settled, village-based life. They weren't just shelters. They were homes centered around a hearth, a place for family and community. This new way of life didn't mean they gave up their old traditions. Hunting and gathering remained crucial for survival. It was a hybrid lifestyle, blending ancient knowledge with new innovations. They were learning to balance the wild harvest with the cultivated one. This period, often called the Basketmaker era, represents a critical transition. The people were still masters of the wild, but they were also becoming masters of the soil. They were learning to work with the land in a new way, not just moving through it, but actively shaping it to support their growing communities. This deep, intimate knowledge of the land's cycles was the foundation upon which everything else was built. They understood the timing of the rains, the movement of the sun, and the properties of the soil. Their calendar was the natural world. The flowering of a certain plant might signal the time to plant their crops, while the migration of birds would tell them it was time to hunt. This wasn't just practical knowledge, it was spiritual. The land wasn't a resource to be exploited. It was a living partner, a provider that demanded respect and reciprocity. Their ceremonies and rituals were deeply tied to these cycles: rituals for rain, for a successful harvest, for a good hunt. This worldview ensured their long-term survival. They understood that their well-being was directly linked to the health of the land. This philosophy of living in balance, of understanding the intricate web of life, is perhaps their greatest legacy. It's the cultural soil from which the later cliff-dwelling societies would grow. So, from the first mammoth hunters to the archaic foragers and the earliest farmers, we see a story of incredible adaptation and innovation spanning thousands of years. These ancient people laid the groundwork, slowly and deliberately building the knowledge and community structures that would eventually lead to the magnificent villages in the cliffs. They weren't just passing through. They were creating a home, developing a culture deeply rooted in the canyons and mesas. Their story is a powerful reminder that the greatest structures are not always built of stone, but of knowledge, resilience, and a deep connection to the earth. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the past. It's amazing to think about the long, winding road that led to the world we explored in our first chapter. Next time, we'll see how these first farmers took the next big step, building the first true villages and setting the stage for the golden age of the ancestral Puebloans. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. See you then. Let's journey back in time about 3,500 years ago to the American Southwest. The archaic hunter-gatherers who had roamed these lands for millennia were on the cusp of a profound transformation. Out of this era of change emerged a new culture, one we now call the Basketmaker people. They are the direct ancestors of the later Ancestral Puebloans, the builders of the great cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. This is their origin story. So why the name Basketmaker? Well, it's because their most remarkable and enduring legacy is their incredible skill in basketry. Long before pottery became common in the region, these people were masters of weaving. Using plant fibers like yucca, sumac, and willow, they crafted everything from large, sturdy baskets for carrying heavy loads to tightly woven, waterproof containers for cooking. Imagine that, cooking in a basket. They would heat rocks in a fire and then drop them into a basket filled with water and food, bringing it to a boil. These weren't just utilitarian objects. They were works of art, often decorated with intricate geometric patterns and dyed with natural pigments. Baskets were used for storage, serving food, and even as hats and sandals. They were central to every aspect of daily life. The Basketmaker era, which we generally divide into early and late periods, began around 1500 BC. This was a time of major innovation. The most significant change was the adoption of agriculture, specifically the cultivation of maize, or corn, and squash. While they still hunted deer and rabbits and gathered wild plants, farming provided a more reliable food source. This simple act of planting a seed would eventually reshape their entire world. With a more stable food supply, people began to settle down. This is when we see the appearance of the first true homes in the region, the pit house. Imagine a shallow pit, dug a few feet into the ground, usually circular or oval. The walls of the pit were often lined with stone slabs or plaster. 4 large posts were set inside to support a sturdy dome-shaped roof made of wood, covered with a thick layer of mud and earth. A central fire pit provided warmth, and a hole in the roof allowed smoke to escape. You'd enter through this smoke hole, climbing down a ladder. These pit houses were snug and well insulated, cool in the summer and warm in the winter. They were more than just shelters. They were the heart of family life. As farming became more productive, storing the harvest became crucial. A good harvest had to last through the long winter and until the next growing season. The basketmakers became ingenious at food storage. They dug bell-shaped pits, both inside and outside their pit houses. The narrow opening at the top was sealed with a stone slab and mud, creating an airtight, rodent-proof container that kept their precious corn dry and safe. They also built above-ground granaries, small storage rooms made of wood and mud, often clustered together. This focus on storage shows a shift in thinking from immediate consumption to long-term planning. It was the foundation of a stable, settled community. But what about their spiritual world? What did they believe? While we have no written records, their art and burial practices give us fascinating clues. In the canyons of Utah and Arizona, they painted and carved stunning images onto rock walls. These pictographs and petroglyphs depict tall, ghostly figures with intricate body paint and decorations, often holding snakes or plants. These figures, known as the barrier canyon style, are believed to represent shamans, gods, or spirits from their cosmology. They are haunting, powerful, and hint at a rich ceremonial life. We also see the beginnings of the kiva, the sacred, subterranean chamber that would become central to later Puebloan religion. Some of the larger, deeper pit houses may have served a dual purpose as both homes and ceremonial spaces for the community. Here, rituals would have been performed to ensure rain, a successful hunt, and a bountiful harvest. Their burials also tell us a lot. They buried their dead in shallow pits, often within abandoned storage cists or the floors of their houses. The bodies were typically placed in a flexed, or fetal, position and wrapped in fur or feather blankets and yucca mats. They were often buried with personal items, a beautiful basket, a string of beads, or a well-used tool. These grave goods suggest a belief in an afterlife, a journey for which the deceased needed to be equipped. Around 500 AD, things started to change again. This marks the transition to the late Basketmaker period. The bow and arrow replaced the atlatl, or spear thrower, making hunting more efficient. Beans were introduced, which, when grown with corn and squash, formed the Three Sisters, a nutritionally complete agricultural package that would sustain the Puebloan people for centuries. But the biggest innovation was the adoption of pottery. While their basketry was superb, pottery offered a new advantage. It could be placed directly over a fire. This made cooking much simpler and more efficient. The earliest pottery was plain and gray, but it didn't take long for them to start decorating it with black geometric designs, foreshadowing the beautiful and iconic black-on-white pottery of their descendants. With these advancements, their small, scattered settlements began to grow into larger, more organized villages. Pit houses were now clustered together, sometimes in groups of a dozen or more. These larger villages signal a more complex social structure and a greater degree of cooperation. People were no longer just living near each other. They were living with each other, forming the first true communities of the ancestral Puebloan world. The Basketmaker period laid the groundwork for everything that followed. They were the pioneers who mastered agriculture in the arid Southwest, who invented new ways to live and store food, and who developed a rich spiritual life that would be passed down through generations. They transformed themselves from mobile foragers into settled farmers, creating the stable foundation upon which the great Puebloan civilizations would rise. The seeds they planted, both literally and culturally, would blossom into the magnificent cliff dwellings and great houses that continue to capture our imagination today. Their legacy is written not in books, but in the land itself, in the faint outlines of ancient pit houses, in the enduring art on canyon walls, and in the timeless traditions of their modern-day descendants. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to the dawn of the Puebloan world. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the ancient past. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through the ancient Southwest. In our last chapter, we saw the first permanent settlements take root. Today, in Chapter 4, we're diving into a period of incredible transformation. A time when pit houses gave way to sprawling villages and the foundations of the great Puebloan societies were laid. This is the story of how a culture reached for the sky, from roughly 700 to 900 CI. Imagine the landscape of the Four Corners region around the year 700. Small clusters of pit houses dot the mesas and canyon floors. Life is centered around family and farming. But something is starting to change. The climate is becoming more favorable for agriculture, with slightly more predictable rainfall. This stability in the food supply, particularly with corn, beans, and squash, acts as a catalyst for one of the most significant shifts in their history, a population boom. Over the next 200 years, the number of people living in this region explodes. Archaeologists see this clearly in the sheer number of new sites that appear. We're not just talking about a few more families here and there. We're talking about a dramatic increase in density, leading to the formation of larger, more complex communities. With more people comes the need for more organization, more innovation, and new ways of living together. This era, often called Pueblo, is where we see the architectural genius of the ancestral Puebloans truly begin to shine. So what happens when your small pit house hamlet starts to feel a bit crowded? You build up. This is the period where we see a revolutionary move from subterranean living to above-ground architecture. The classic pit house, which had been the standard for centuries, doesn't disappear overnight. Instead, it evolves. People began building rectangular rooms made of hakala framework of wooden poles packed with mud and brush or simple masonry, right on the ground surface. These rooms were often built side by side in long rows, creating the very first apartment-style complexes in North America. Think of it as a modular system. A family might have a few connected rooms for living, cooking, and storage. As the family grew, they could simply add on another room. This created long linear or L-shaped blocks of buildings. These early pueblos were a direct response to a growing population. They were efficient, expandable, and fostered a greater sense of community. Instead of being semi-isolated in individual pit houses, families were now living wall-to-wall with their neighbors. But what about the pit houses? Did they just abandon them? Not at all. They repurposed them. As the above-ground rooms took over as the primary living spaces, the old pit house structure transformed into something new and vital, the kiva. The kiva became the ceremonial heart of the village. It remained a subterranean circular chamber, accessed by a ladder through a hole in the roof. This sacred space connected the community to the underworld and the world of their ancestors. It was where rituals were performed, stories were told, and important community decisions were made. The separation of daily life in the above-ground rooms from the spiritual life in the subterranean kiva marks a profound shift in their worldview and social structure. Every village of any size now had at least one kiva, symbolizing the importance of shared spiritual practice in binding the community together. Let's visualize a typical village from this period. Around 850 CE, you'd see one or more blocks of surface rooms, maybe a dozen or two all facing a central plaza. This open plaza area was the hub of daily activity. It's where women would grind corn, men would craft tools, and children would play. It was the village square, the social center. And situated within this plaza, you would find the kiva, its roof flush with the ground, a ladder pole reaching up towards the sky. This layout surface rooms a plaza, and a kiva became the fundamental template for Puebloan villages for the next 500 years. It was a design that perfectly balanced the private lives of families with the public and spiritual needs of the community. This period also saw the emergence of what archaeologists call great kivas. These were massive versions of the standard kiva, sometimes over 50 feet in diameter. They were far too large for a single clan or extended family. Instead, they likely served as regional ceremonial centers, drawing people from many smaller villages in the surrounding area for important events and rituals. The construction of a great kiva required an immense amount of coordinated labor, suggesting a level of social organization that went beyond a single village. It hints at the beginnings of alliances and regional identities, with leaders who could command the labor and resources of a larger population. The population growth and architectural changes didn't happen in a vacuum. They were fueled and supported by another crucial development, the expansion of trade. The ancestral Puebloans were becoming masters of their environment, but they didn't have everything they needed. And they had surpluses of things other people wanted, like high-quality turquoise, woven cotton textiles, and sophisticated pottery. During the 700s and 800s, trade networks that had existed for centuries began to expand dramatically. Goods from the Four Corners region started traveling incredible distances. We find Puebloan pottery as far south as northern Mexico. And in return, exotic items flowed into the Pueblo world. The most dazzling of these were macaws and parrots from the jungles of Mesoamerica. These birds, with their brilliantly colored feathers, were highly prized for ceremonial use. Finding their remains in a kiva in Utah or Colorado is stunning evidence of a trade network that stretched over 1,000 miles. Seashells from the Pacific coast and the Gulf of California also became common decorative items, used in jewelry and ornaments. This wasn't just casual bartering. This was an organized, sophisticated system of exchange. It connected the ancestral Puebloans to a vast continent-wide economy. This trade brought not only new goods, but also new ideas, new technologies, and new cultural influences. It broadened their world and likely contributed to the increasing complexity we see in their society. Certain villages, perhaps those situated along major trade routes or near valuable resources like turquoise mines, may have become powerful centers of commerce. The pottery of this period also tells a story of innovation and regional identity. While the simple gray utility wares continued to be made for cooking, a new style of decorated pottery emerged, black-on-white ware. Potters began to paint intricate geometric designs on a white background before firing the pot. Each region, and sometimes even individual communities, developed its own distinctive style of decoration. For archaeologists, these styles are like fingerprints, allowing them to trace connections, trade, and the movement of people across the landscape. The explosion of creativity in pottery design reflects a culture with the time and stability to invest in art and express its identity. So let's recap this incredible 200-year period. We start with a landscape of small, dispersed pit house settlements. A favorable climate leads to a population boom. In response, people begin building multi-room, above-ground pueblos, creating larger and more integrated villages. The pit house is transformed into the kiva, a dedicated ceremonial space that becomes the spiritual core of the community. This new village layout, with its plaza and kiva, sets the stage for centuries to come. And underpinning it all is an expanding trade network that brings wealth, exotic goods, and new ideas into the Puebloan world, connecting them to cultures hundreds of miles away. This era was not just about building bigger houses. It was a fundamental reshaping of society. It laid the social, architectural, and spiritual groundwork for the even more spectacular developments that were to come in Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde. The move from the pit house to the Pueblo was a move from a small-scale, family-based existence to a larger, more complex, and more interconnected world. The ancestral Puebloans were literally and figuratively reaching new heights. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The story is only getting more exciting from here. In our next episode, we'll travel to a place where these developments reach their absolute zenith, the magnificent, mysterious Chaco Canyon. You won't want to miss it. If you're enjoying this series, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. We'll see you in the next chapter. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the incredible history of Mesa Verde. In our last chapter, we explored the early settlements and the transition from pit houses to the first pueblos. Today, we're stepping into what many archaeologists call the golden age of the ancestral Pueblo people, a remarkable period spanning from about 900 to 1100 CE. This era, often referred to as the Pueblo II period, saw an explosion of growth, innovation, and cultural development right here on the mesa tops. So let's dive into Chapter 5, A Golden Age on the Mesa Top. Imagine a landscape buzzing with life. The small, scattered hamlets of the past were transforming into larger, more permanent villages. This was a time of confidence and expansion. The ancestral Pueblo people had mastered their environment in a way they never had before. The key to this prosperity was agriculture. They refined their farming techniques, perfecting the art of dryland farming in this challenging semi-arid climate. They built sophisticated water and soil control features, like check dams, terraces, and reservoirs, to capture every precious drop of rain and snowmelt. This agricultural revolution allowed them to cultivate larger fields of corn, beans, and squash, producing a surplus that could support a rapidly growing population. With a stable food supply, people could invest their time and energy into other aspects of life, and that's when things get really interesting. The villages themselves became marvels of planning and architecture. Instead of just a few rooms clustered together, communities started building large, multi-story pueblos, often arranged in a U-shape or L-shape. These structures were made from beautifully crafted double-coursed masonry, with two parallel walls of shaped sandstone blocks and a rubble core in between. The stonework from this period is just exquisite, showing a level of skill and artistry that was unparalleled. These larger pueblos weren't just random collections of houses. They were organized communities. They often faced south to maximize warmth from the winter sun. And a central plaza became the heart of the village, a place for social gatherings and ceremonies. And at the center of it all, both physically and spiritually, was the kiva. The kivas of this era became larger and more formalized, serving as the ceremonial and social centers for extended family groups or clans. It is clear from the layout of these villages that society was becoming more complex and more structured. This societal structure is also reflected in their material culture, especially their pottery. The simple gray and early black-on-white pottery of the past evolved into stunning new forms. This is the era of what we call Menkos black-on-white pottery. The designs became bolder, more intricate, and more geometric. Potters were true artists, painting fine-line patterns, interlocking spirals, and complex geometric shapes on beautifully polished white surfaces. Each piece was not just a utilitarian vessel for cooking or storage. It was a work of art, a form of expression. The quality and standardization of these designs suggest that potting was becoming a specialized craft, with skilled artisans passing down their techniques and styles through generations. They also produced corrugated grayware, where the coils used to build the pot were left visible on the outside, creating a textured surface that was both beautiful and practical as it improved heat distribution for cooking. The sheer volume and variety of pottery from this period tell us about a thriving society with a strong cultural identity. Trade networks also expanded significantly during this golden age. The people of Mesa Verde weren't living in isolation. Archaeological evidence shows they were trading with people from hundreds of miles away. They imported turquoise from as far as New Mexico, shells from the Pacific coast, and even macaws and copper bells from Mexico. In return, they likely traded their high-quality pottery, woven cotton textiles, and agricultural surplus. This exchange of goods also meant an exchange of ideas, connecting the Mesa Verde communities to a much wider cultural world. This period of interaction and prosperity helped to solidify a shared cultural identity across the region, even as different villages maintained their own unique traditions. It was a time of immense social and cultural cohesion. The population on the mesa top reached its peak during these 2 centuries. Thousands of people lived in dozens of vibrant communities spread across the landscape. You can imagine the mesas being a patchwork of fields and villages, the air filled with the sounds of children playing, dogs barking, turkeys gobbling, and people going about their daily lives grinding corn, weaving baskets, and firing pottery. Life was organized and communal. It was a time of relative peace and stability. The architecture, the art, the agriculture, everything points to a society that was confident, well-organized, and deeply connected to both their land and their traditions. They had created a sustainable and flourishing civilization in a demanding environment. This wasn't a simple, primitive existence. It was a complex and sophisticated society at the zenith of its power and creativity on the mesa top. But as we know from history, golden ages don't last forever. By the late 1100s, subtle changes began to occur. The climate started to shift and new social pressures began to mount. The very success and population growth of this era may have sown the seeds for the dramatic changes that were to come. What happened next? Why did the people of Mesa Verde begin to move from these prosperous mesa-top villages into the incredible cliff dwellings the park is so famous for? That is the story for our next chapter. We'll explore the environmental and social factors that triggered one of the most fascinating architectural shifts in human history. Thanks so much for watching and joining me on this exploration of Mesa Verde's golden age. It's a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the ancestral Pueblo people. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss Chapter 6. We've got so much more to uncover. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through time. Today, we're stepping into a pivotal chapter in the story of the ancestral Pueblo people, the Great Move to the Cliffs. For centuries, these innovative people had built thriving villages on the flat tops of mesas, farming the land and creating vibrant communities. But around the year 1100, something began to change. A new architectural marvel started to appear, not on top of the mesas, but tucked into the very walls of the canyons themselves. This was the dawn of the cliff dwellings, an era that would define their culture and leave a legacy that still astounds us today. So what prompted this monumental shift? Why leave the open mesas for the sheltered alcoves? The answer isn't a simple one. It's a fascinating mix of ingenuity, adaptation, and perhaps a response to a changing world. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore the compelling reasons behind this move from climate control and defense to community and spirituality. This wasn't just a change of address. It was a complete transformation of their way of life. Let's delve into the world of the cliff dwellers. So, why would an entire civilization decide to relocate into the sheer rock faces of canyons? One of the most powerful drivers was the climate. Imagine living on an exposed mesa top. In the summer, the sun is relentless, beating down from dawn till dusk. In the winter, biting winds sweep across the open landscape, making it difficult to stay warm. The cliff alcoves offered a brilliant natural solution. These south-facing overhangs acted like passive solar homes. During the winter, the low-angled sun would shine deep into the alcoves, warming the thick stone and adobe walls of the dwellings. This stored heat would then radiate out through the cold nights, keeping the homes remarkably comfortable. But in the summer, the high-angled sun would be blocked by the rock overhang, casting the village in cool, welcome shade. This ingenious use of the natural landscape meant less firewood was needed for warmth and provided a more stable, comfortable living environment year-round. It was a masterclass in sustainable living, using the earth itself as a form of natural air conditioning and heating. Beyond climate control, another crucial factor was defense. As the 12th and 13th centuries unfolded, the region may have been experiencing increased social pressures. This could have been due to a variety of reasons. Perhaps a growing population put a strain on resources like water and arable land, leading to competition and conflict between different groups. By moving into the cliffs, the communities created a natural fortress. These dwellings were incredibly difficult to access. Entry was often limited to a few specific points, using hand and toe holds carved directly into the rock face or via wooden ladders that could be pulled up in times of danger. An enemy would have to scale a sheer cliff wall, completely exposed, just to reach the village. This strategic positioning gave the inhabitants a massive defensive advantage. They could see anyone approaching from miles away and would be well protected from any potential attack. The move to the cliffs wasn't just about comfort. It was a smart, strategic decision to ensure the safety and security of their people in an uncertain world. But life in the cliffs was about more than just defense and temperature. It was also about community. While the mesa-top villages were sometimes spread out, the cliff dwellings were, by their very nature, compact and integrated. Imagine living in a space like Cliff Palace or Balcony House. You're living side by side with your neighbors. Your daily life is interwoven with theirs. This close proximity would have fostered an incredible sense of community cohesion. People shared walls, plazas, and kivas. They would have worked together, celebrated together, and supported each other through daily challenges. The architecture itself encouraged social interaction. The central plazas were hubs of activity where people would grind corn, weave baskets, and share stories. Children played under the watchful eyes of the entire community. This tight-knit structure wasn't accidental. It was a fundamental part of their social fabric. By building their homes together in these protected alcoves, they weren't just creating a village. They were reinforcing the bonds of kinship and creating a powerful, unified community that functioned as a single, extended family. Finally, we can't overlook the profound spiritual significance of this move. For the Pueblo people, the landscape itself is sacred. The cliffs, the canyons, the springs, they are all imbued with spiritual meaning. The natural alcoves were seen as powerful, protective places, transitional zones between the sky and the earth. Choosing to build their homes and ceremonial kivas within the embrace of the earth was likely a deeply spiritual act. The kivas, the subterranean ceremonial chambers, were the heart of their religious life. By building them within the cliff alcoves, they were placing them in a space that was already considered holy. This connection to the land was central to their worldview. Living within the cliffs was a way of living in harmony with the natural and spiritual worlds. It was a physical manifestation of their beliefs, a statement that they were a part of the earth, not separate from it. The move was as much a journey of the spirit as it was a physical migration. It was a way to live closer to the sacred elements that sustained them, both physically and spiritually. So let's trace the beginnings of this architectural revolution. The first cliff houses were not the grand, multi-story cities we often picture. They started much smaller, around the late 1100s. People began to identify promising sheltered alcoves in the canyon walls. The earliest structures were often modest, perhaps just a few rooms built against the back wall of a shallow cave. These were likely an experiment, a testing of the waters. They would have used the same techniques they perfected on the mesas, carefully shaping sandstone blocks and binding them with a mortar of mud and water. The location was key. They looked for south-facing alcoves to maximize that solar warmth, and ideally, a site near a seep spring, which would provide a reliable source of water trickling directly out of the rock. You can imagine the first families making this bold move, leaving the familiar open spaces of the mesa top for a new life tucked into the stone. It must have been a huge decision, but one that quickly proved its worth, setting the stage for the incredible construction boom that would follow. As the 13th century progressed, this initial experiment exploded into a full-blown architectural movement. The small, isolated dwellings grew into a complex of large, sophisticated villages. This was the Great Pueblo period, the golden age of cliff dwelling. Master builders and masons refined their techniques, creating structures that were both beautiful and incredibly durable. They learned to build multiple stories high, fitting hundreds of rooms into a single alcove. Places like Cliff Palace, with its 150 rooms and 23 kivas, or balcony house, with its incredible defensive design, showcased the peak of their engineering prowess. They built towers, terraces, and plazas, all perfectly integrated with the natural contours of the cliff. They used wooden beams, hauled from miles away, for roofs and floors. The walls were often plastered with a smooth layer of adobe, sometimes even painted with murals. This wasn't just shelter. This was a thriving civilization expressing its identity, its power, and its artistry in stone and mud, creating a legacy that would endure for centuries. So, to recap this incredible transformation, the move to the cliffs was not a single decision, but a response to a complex set of needs. The need for climate control drove them to seek the natural heating and cooling of the alcoves. The need for security in a potentially more hostile world led them to build natural fortresses. The need for community was met by the close, integrated design of the cliff villages, which strengthened social bonds. And the need for spiritual connection was fulfilled by living within the sacred embrace of the earth itself. From the first tentative structures in the canyon walls to the magnificent cliffside cities, this 200-year period represents a remarkable chapter of human adaptation and ingenuity. The ancestral Pueblo people didn't just survive in a challenging environment. They thrived by listening to the land and working with it, creating a unique and enduring way of life. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration. If you enjoyed this journey, please like, subscribe, and join us next time as we investigate the great mystery. Why, after creating these magnificent homes, did they leave? See you then. Welcome back to our journey through the incredible world of the ancestral Puebloans. Today, we're diving deep into Chapter 7, where we'll unravel the mysteries behind how these ancient people built their magnificent great houses in stone. How did they construct multi-story cities in sheer cliff faces, with nothing but the tools and resources of the natural world? The answer is a story of incredible ingenuity, community, and sheer brilliance. Imagine standing at the base of a towering sandstone cliff, 1,000 years ago. The first step in building a place like Cliff Palace or Balcony House was quarrying the stone. The ancestral Puebloans were masters of their environment. They would look for natural fractures in the sandstone formations. Using hard, dense river stones as hammerstones and sharp pieces of chert or quartzite as chisels, they would meticulously peck and hammer along these fracture lines. Sometimes they'd drive wooden wedges into the cracks, soak them with water, and let the swelling wood split the massive blocks free. It was slow, laborious work, demanding immense patience and a deep understanding of geology. Once a block was freed, the real artistry began. This wasn't just about brute force. It was about precision. Using smaller stone tools, they would carefully shape each block. They'd grind down the surfaces, making them flat and uniform. If you look closely at the walls of Spruce Tree House, you'll see the peck marks, the faint traces of the hands that shaped each and every stone over a millennium ago. They didn't have tape measures or levels, but they had an incredible eye for geometry. They knew which stones would fit where, shaping them to curve with the natural contours of the alcove, or to form a perfect, sharp corner. Each stone was essentially custom-made for its specific place in the wall. Now, how do you move a block of sandstone that weighs hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds, without wheels or beasts of burden? The answer is teamwork. We believe they used a combination of brute strength, wooden levers, and woven yucca fiber ropes. Small logs may have been used as rollers to move the heaviest blocks across the ground. To get them up to the higher levels of a structure, they likely built sturdy wooden scaffolding and used ramps. It would have been a community effort, with dozens of people working together, pushing, pulling, and carefully maneuvering these massive stones into position. It's a testament to their social organization and shared purpose. With the stones quarried, shaped, and moved into place, the next crucial element was mortar. What held these incredible structures together for centuries? The ancestral Puebloan mortar was a simple yet effective mixture of local mud, clay, and water, sometimes with ash or small stones added for extra strength. They would pack this mixture generously into the gaps between the sandstone blocks. This mortar did more than just bind the stones. It also created a tight seal against the wind and rain, and filled in any irregularities between the blocks, creating a stable, solid wall. You can still see the fingerprints of the builders pressed into the mortar, in some places an intimate human connection to the past. The architectural planning behind these great houses is simply staggering. These weren't just simple huts. They were sophisticated multi-story apartment complexes, some with over 150 rooms. Think about Cliff Palace. It's a city nestled into a cliff. The design had to account for the natural shape of the rock alcove. Rooms were built on top of rooms, connected by ladders and narrow passageways. The builders had an intuitive understanding of structural engineering. They would build thicker walls at the base to support the weight of the stories above. They designed T-shaped doorways, which are not just iconic but also practical, allowing people to pass through easily while carrying bulky items on their backs. This multi-story design was a brilliant use of limited space. Building vertically within the protective overhang of a cliff offered defense from enemies and shelter from the harsh sun and winter snow. The layout of these villages wasn't random. They typically included living quarters, storage rooms for corn and other goods, and ceremonial kivas, the circular subterranean chambers that were the heart of their spiritual life. The placement of rooms, plazas, and kivas suggests a highly organized society with a complex understanding of community planning. They were designing not just buildings, but a way of life. The stone masonry itself is where their genius truly shines. There are different styles visible throughout Mesa Verde. Some walls are made of rough, minimally shaped stones, likely from earlier construction periods. But the classic style features those beautifully dressed, loaf-sized blocks laid in neat, even courses. The walls are often double or even triple-walled, with a core of rubble and mortar filling the space between the inner and outer faces. This made the walls incredibly thick and stable, and also provided excellent insulation, keeping rooms cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Look at the fine details. The perfectly squared corners, the smooth lintels over doorways, the small ventilation holes placed just right. It's a level of craftsmanship that rivals any in the ancient world. The builders of these great houses were not just laborers. They were skilled artisans, engineers, and architects. They had a deep ancestral knowledge passed down through generations, a knowledge of stone, of structure, and of place. When you gaze upon iconic structures like Cliff Palace, the largest cliff dwelling in North America, you're seeing the culmination of this knowledge. It's a sprawling, organic city that seems to grow right out of the rock. Or consider Balcony House, a marvel of defensive architecture, perched precariously on a ledge, accessible only by climbing a 32-foot ladder and crawling through a narrow tunnel. And Spruce Tree House, so well preserved in its alcove, feels like its residents just left yesterday. These aren't ruins. They are monuments to a thriving, sophisticated culture. The construction of the great houses in stone tells a story of a people deeply connected to their landscape, who work together to create a lasting home in a challenging world. Their legacy is written in stone, a silent testament to their ingenuity and resilience that continues to inspire awe and wonder today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. If you found this fascinating, make sure to subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you then. Step back in time with me to a world carved into the very heart of the earth. Imagine waking not to an alarm clock, but to the first golden rays of sunlight painting the canyon walls. This is the daily rhythm of life in the cliff dwellings, a life of community, purpose, and deep connection to the land. As the sun climbs higher, the village stirs. The air fills with the gentle sounds of life. From the central plaza, the smell of wood smoke drifts up from the fire pits, where the morning meal is being prepared. Corn, a sacred and essential crop, is ground into fine flour on a stone metate, its rhythmic scraping a familiar morning song. This flour will become hearty cornbread or a warm porridge, cooked in beautiful handcrafted clay pots. These pots, decorated with intricate black-on-white designs, are more than just cookware. They are works of art, symbols of a rich cultural heritage. Each family has its own set, carefully made and treasured. The day's work is a shared effort, a dance of responsibilities that keeps the community thriving. Down in the canyon below, or on the mesa tops above, farmers tend to their crops. Using simple digging sticks, they cultivate the three sisters corn, beans, and squash. These plants grow together in harmony, supporting one another just as the people of the village do. The corn provides a stalk for the beans to climb. The beans enrich the soil with nitrogen, and the broad leaves of the squash shade the ground, preserving precious moisture. Every drop of water is a gift, carefully collected from seeps in the rock face or channeled from summer rainstorms into reservoirs. Carrying water up the steep cliffs in pottery jars is a daily chore, often undertaken by the women and older children, their steady feet knowing every foothold. While some are farming, others are out in the wilder parts of the landscape. Hunting parties, armed with bows and arrows, might track deer or rabbits, their movements quiet and patient. A successful hunt means a celebration, a bounty of meat to be shared among all the families. It's a moment of gratitude for the resources the land provides. Meanwhile, gathering groups, mostly women and children, explore the canyons and mesas for wild foods. They collect vitamin-rich berries, nutritious nuts like pinnin, and a variety of edible plants and herbs that supplement their diet and serve as medicine. This deep knowledge of the local botany is passed down through generations, an essential library of survival stored in memory. Back in the village, the open-air plazas are hives of activity. Weavers sit at their looms, their fingers moving deftly to transform cotton and yucca fibers into blankets, sandals, and baskets. The rhythmic clack of the loom is a constant soothing sound. The patterns they create are not random. They tell stories, record histories, and reflect the beauty of the natural world around them. Nearby, a potter shapes a new vessel from a lump of clay, her hands working with a practiced, loving touch. She painted with a brush made from yucca fibers and fire it in a pit, turning soft earth into a durable, beautiful tool for her family. Children are the future, and their upbringing is a community affair. They learn by watching, by participating, and by listening to the stories of their elders. They help with small tasks, like fetching water or grinding corn, their small hands mimicking the motions of their parents. They play games in the plazas, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Their education isn't found in books, but in the practical skills of farming, hunting, and crafting, and in the oral traditions that connect them to their ancestors and their place in the universe. They learn respect for the elders, for the land, and for the spirits that inhabit it. As the afternoon sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the canyon, people gather to rest and share the day's stories. The household is the heart of it all. Each family has its own rooms, often connected to others, creating a tight-knit network of homes. A central fire pit provides warmth and light, a place for cooking, and a focal point for family life. Walls are plastered with adobe mud, keeping the rooms cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Storage rooms, called granaries, are filled with dried corn and beans, a testament to the hard work of the harvest and a promise of security through the lean winter months. Evening descends, and the village settles into a peaceful quiet. The fire pits glow like embers in the heart of the cliff. The stars emerge, a brilliant, breathtaking canopy untouched by modern lights. This is a time for storytelling, for passing down the myths and histories that define who they are. An elder's voice might rise, weaving tales of the creation, of heroic ancestors, and of the sacred relationship between the people and the land. The children listen, their eyes wide in the firelight, absorbing the wisdom of generations. Life in the cliff dwellings was not easy. It required hard work, resilience, and an intimate understanding of a challenging environment. But it was also a life of profound beauty, community, and balance. Every task had meaning, every day was a cycle of purpose, and every person had a vital role to play. It was a life lived in harmony with the rhythms of the earth, a testament to the ingenuity and spirit of a people who built their homes and their world in the shelter of the cliffs. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the past, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Welcome to our deep dive into the ingenuity of ancient farmers. Today, we're exploring Chapter 9, Farming on the Mesa in a Dry Climate. How did people not just survive, but thrive in a landscape that seems so unforgiving? It's a story of incredible knowledge, resilience, and a deep connection to the land. Imagine living on a high, flat-topped mountain, a mesa, where rain is scarce and the sun is intense. It doesn't sound like a farmer's paradise, does it? Yet for centuries, this was home. And the secret to their success lay in mastering the art of dry farming. This wasn't just about planting seeds and hoping for the best. It was a sophisticated system built on generations of observation and wisdom. At the heart of their agriculture were 4 key crops, a powerhouse of nutrition and utility. First and foremost was maize or corn. But this wasn't the sweet corn we eat today. They cultivated diverse varieties, each adapted to different conditions, some for short seasons, others for extreme drought. Maize was more than food. It was a cultural centerpiece, woven into their ceremonies and stories. It provided the essential carbohydrates that fueled their communities. Next up, we have beans. Climbing beans were often planted right alongside the maize. This was a brilliant strategy known as companion planting. The tall, sturdy maize stalks acted as natural trellises for the beans to climb. But the partnership went deeper. Beans are what we call nitrogen fixers. They pull nitrogen from the air and convert it into a nutrient in the soil, which in turn fertilizes the maize. In return, the maize provided support. It's a perfect example of natural synergy. Then there's squash. With its broad, sprawling leaves, squash was planted at the base of the maize and beans. These large leaves created a living mulch, shading the soil, which helped to keep it cool and retain precious moisture. This shade also suppressed the growth of weeds that would compete for water. So you have maize reaching for the sky, beans climbing up the stalks, and squash protecting the ground below. Together, they are known as the Three Sisters, a truly integrated and self-sustaining agricultural system. And finally, cotton. Growing cotton in a dry climate is a serious challenge, which makes their success even more impressive. Cotton wasn't just for clothing. It was used for textiles, cords, and ceremonial items. Its successful cultivation speaks volumes about their advanced understanding of soil and water. They likely selected specific plots of land with deeper soil that could hold moisture for longer, and used careful techniques to ensure each plant had enough resources to mature. So, how did they manage water in a place where it was so rare? This is where their engineering genius truly shines. They didn't have massive irrigation canals like those in other ancient civilizations. Instead, they relied on small-scale, highly effective water management techniques. They built check dams, which are small stone walls constructed across arroyos or small gullies. When the infrequent but powerful summer rains came, these dams would slow the runoff, allowing the water to soak deep into the soil instead of washing away. This created pockets of moisture that would sustain crops for weeks. They also created terraces on the slopes of the mesas. These level steps of land prevented soil erosion and captured rainfall, turning steep, unusable hillsides into productive gardens. You can still see the remnants of these stone terraces today, a testament to their incredible labor and foresight. Another clever technique was the use of gravel mulch. They discovered that a layer of small pebbles on top of the soil acted as a protective blanket. It reduced evaporation from the sun's heat, kept the soil temperature more stable, and allowed rainwater to trickle through while preventing it from escaping. It was a simple yet profoundly effective way to conserve every drop of water. This entire system was orchestrated by an intimate understanding of seasonal cycles. They were expert astronomers, tracking the sun's path across the sky to predict the changing of the seasons. Rock art and structures aligned with the solstices show us they knew precisely when to plant and when to harvest. This calendar wasn't just about dates. It was a guide to the rhythms of the natural world, the arrival of the monsoon rains, the last frost, and the hottest days of summer. Planting wasn't done all at once. They would stagger their plantings in different locations, some on the mesa top, some on the slopes, and some down in the canyon bottoms. This was a form of agricultural insurance. If a late frost hit the lower fields, the crops on the warmer mesa top might survive. If the mesa top proved too dry one year, the fields that received more runoff in the canyons might flourish. It was a strategy of diversification that minimized risk and ensured a harvest even in the toughest years. The choice of seeds was also critical. Over centuries, they selectively bred varieties of maize, beans, and squash that were perfectly suited to their local environment. They saved seeds from the hardiest plants, the ones that produced well with little water or survived a surprise pest infestation. This created a genetic bank of resilient crops, a legacy of knowledge passed down through the seeds themselves. Farming wasn't just a job. It was a communal activity deeply embedded in their social and spiritual lives. Everyone participated, from the elders who held the knowledge of the seasons to the children who helped with weeding and harvesting. Planting and harvesting were accompanied by ceremonies, songs, and prayers, reinforcing the sacred connection between the people, the land, and the crops that sustained them. Their success was not about conquering nature, but about working with it. They understood their environment on a profound level: the soil, the sun, the water, the plants, and the animals. They saw themselves as part of a complex web of life, not separate from it. This worldview guided every decision, from where to build a terrace to which seeds to plant. This deep ecological knowledge allowed them to create a sustainable agricultural system that lasted for hundreds of years in a challenging landscape. It's a powerful lesson for us today, as we face our own challenges with climate change and resource scarcity. The story of farming on the mesa reminds us of the power of observation, ingenuity, and living in harmony with our environment. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the past. It's truly inspiring to see how these ancient farmers created abundance in such a demanding place. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more explorations into the incredible stories of human history. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're diving deep into Chapter 10, exploring the heart of ancient Puebloan society, their community, ceremonies, and rich spiritual life. Imagine a world where every aspect of life was interwoven with belief, where the cosmos was mirrored in the architecture, and where stories held the wisdom of generations. This was the world of the ancestral Pueblo people, and at the center of it all was a unique and sacred structure, the kiva. So what exactly is a kiva? In the simplest terms, a kiva was a ceremonial chamber, a sacred space set apart from daily life. Archaeologically, we find them throughout the Puebloan world, from the grand great houses of Chaco Canyon to smaller village sites. While their size and design could vary, they shared key features that tell us a profound story about their purpose. Most kivas were circular and built partially or fully underground, symbolizing a connection to the earth itself, a womb from which life emerges. Entering a kiva was like stepping into another realm, a space that connected the human world to the spiritual world. Let's step inside a reconstructed kiva and look around. You'd likely descend a ladder through an opening in the roof, the only entrance. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, you'd notice several distinct features. Along the curved walls, you'd see stone benches, providing seating for community members or ceremonial participants. In the center of the floor, a stone-lined fire pit would have provided warmth and light, its smoke curling up towards the opening in the roof, carrying prayers and intentions to the world above. Near the fire pit, you'd find a sophisticated ventilation system. A fresh air shaft would bring oxygen from the outside, channeled down and across the floor to the fire, creating a draft that efficiently pulled smoke up and out. This wasn't just practical engineering. It was a system that allowed the fire to breathe, to live, mirroring the life-giving breath of the participants. But perhaps the most significant feature, the spiritual heart of the kiva, is a small, curious hole in the floor known as the sipapu. In Puebloan cosmology, the sipapu represents the place of emergence, the portal through which the first people journeyed from the underworlds into the fourth world. It is the literal and symbolic connection to their origin, a constant reminder of their sacred journey and their deep ties to the earth. The sipapu makes the kiva more than just a building. It makes it a living axis between different realms. Every ceremony, every story told within these walls was anchored to this point of creation. Kivas weren't just for major, exclusive rituals. They were the social and spiritual glue of the community. They were classrooms where elders passed down essential knowledge, theaters for storytelling, and gathering halls for making important community decisions. The cosmology, the entire belief system of the Pueblo people, was taught and reinforced here. This cosmology was complex and beautiful, viewing the universe as a layered, interconnected place. There were worlds below and worlds above, and humanity's purpose was to live in balance and harmony within this intricate structure, a concept known as Uncho Jindin Navajo tradition, a principle shared by many neighboring cultures. Storytelling was the primary vehicle for this education. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were epic narratives that explained the creation of the world, the migrations of the clans, the deeds of heroic figures, and the moral codes for living a proper life. Imagine sitting on those stone benches, the firelight flickering and casting shadows on the walls, listening to an elder recount the journey through the sipapu. The story would come alive, filled with powerful beings, trials, and triumphs. These narratives explained why the seasons change, why rain falls, and why ceremonies must be performed. They were a living library of cultural identity. Life was governed by a precise ceremonial calendar, tied directly to the cycles of the sun and the moon. Seasonal rituals were paramount for survival and well-being. There were winter solstice ceremonies to call back the sun and ensure the lengthening of days. There were planting ceremonies in the spring to bless the seeds and ask for a bountiful harvest. In the dry summer months, elaborate rain-bringing rituals, often involving costume dancers representing cloud spirits or katsinas, were performed to coax moisture from the sky. In the fall, harvest ceremonies gave thanks for the food that would sustain the community through the winter. Each ceremony was a communal effort, reinforcing social bonds and shared purpose. The kiva was the place of preparation, where participants would fast, pray, and create the intricate regalia needed for public dances. The rituals that began in the privacy of the kiva would often culminate in the public plaza, allowing the entire village to witness and share in the spiritual energy generated. Archaeological evidence provides stunning confirmation of this ceremonial life. Beyond the kivas themselves, we find artifacts directly related to ritual. We find prayer sticks, known as pahos, which were offerings left at shrines. We find beautifully painted pottery with symbolic designs of rain, lightning, and feathers. We find remnants of macaw feathers and turquoise, items traded from hundreds of miles away, indicating their immense ceremonial value. At sites like Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, the sheer number of kivas, over 30 great kivas and hundreds of smaller ones, points to a society deeply organized around ceremony. The alignment of these structures with solar and lunar events shows an incredibly sophisticated understanding of astronomy, woven directly into their spiritual practices. So when we look at an ancient Puebloan village, we must see more than just stone walls. We must see a community bound together by a shared understanding of the cosmos. We must hear the faint echo of storytellers and the rhythmic beat of ceremonial dancers. The kiva was the heart of this world, a sacred space where the community renewed its connection to the earth, the cosmos, and to each other. It was here, in these subterranean chambers, that the spiritual life of an entire people was nurtured, ensuring their culture would endure for 1,000 years and beyond. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the spiritual world of the ancestral Puebloans. It's a powerful reminder that for many cultures, the physical and spiritual worlds are not separate, but beautifully intertwined. If you enjoyed this exploration, please hit that like button, subscribe for more chapters from our historical journey, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the incredible world of the ancestral Puebloans. Today, in Chapter 11, we're diving into the heart of their culture, their artistry. We'll explore the stunning black-on-white pottery of Mesa Verde, decipher the mysterious symbols in their rock art, and see how their amazing craftsmanship traveled far and wide. This isn't just about old objects. It's about connecting with the stories, beliefs, and daily lives of a people who turned everyday items into timeless masterpieces. So get ready to be amazed by the creativity and skill that flourished in the canyons and mesas of the Southwest hundreds of years ago. Let us start with one of the most iconic art forms of the ancestral Puebloans, the black-on-white pottery of Mesa Verde. Imagine holding one of these pieces. The surface is smooth and cool, a pale, almost white clay that feels solid and earthy. Then, your eyes are drawn to the intricate designs painted in a bold black pigment made from minerals and plants. These aren't just random patterns. They are a language of their own. You'll see mesmerizing geometric shapes, fine parallel lines, step terraces that might represent clouds or mountains, and swirling spirals that could symbolize the journey of life or the movement of water. These designs were painted with incredible precision, using brushes made from yucca fibers. Each line is steady, each shape perfectly formed. Think about it, no potter's wheels, no modern tools, just skilled hands and a deep understanding of their materials. The potters, who were primarily women, created a variety of forms, from large storage jars called ollas and elegant pitchers to personal mugs and bowls. Each piece was unique, a testament to the artist's individual style and creativity. These weren't just utility items for storing food and water. They were expressions of beauty and cultural identity, objects that brought art into every aspect of daily life. The striking contrast between the black designs and the white clay makes this pottery instantly recognizable and truly unforgettable. Now, let's move from the home to the sacred canyon walls and rock faces, where another powerful form of art comes to life, rock art. The ancestral Puebloans left behind thousands of images packed, carved, or painted onto stone. These are known as petroglyphs and pictographs. When you stand before a panel of rock art, you're looking at a story frozen in time, What do these images mean? That's the great mystery that continues to fascinate archaeologists and visitors alike. You might see human-like figures, often called anthropomorphs. Some are simple stick figures, while others have elaborate headdresses, masks, or body paint, suggesting ceremonial or spiritual significance. Are they representations of shamans, deities, or ancient ancestors? Then there are the animal figures. You'll find depictions of bighorn sheep with their magnificent curving horns, deer, snakes, and birds. These animals were vital for survival, providing food and materials, but they also held deep symbolic meaning in the Pueblo worldview. A bighorn sheep might symbolize fertility or endurance, while a snake could represent water or lightning. Beyond figures, there are abstract symbols. Spirals are incredibly common, and as we saw in pottery, they could represent the sun's journey, water, or the migration of a clan. Wavy lines might depict rivers or rain, and handprints could be a signature, a claim to a place, or a portal to the spiritual world. The meaning of these symbols can be complex and layered. They likely served many purposes: marking trails, recording important events like a successful hunt or a solar eclipse, telling creation stories, or mapping the cosmos. Each panel of rock art is a sacred text, a library written on stone, offering us a glimpse into the minds and souls of the people who created them. So how did these incredible artistic traditions and skills spread across such a vast and challenging landscape? The answer lies in the extensive trade networks that connected the ancestral Puebloan world. These weren't just simple exchanges. They were vibrant highways of commerce, culture, and ideas. Imagine ancient pathways bustling with traders carrying precious goods on their backs. From Mesa Verde, that beautiful black-on-white pottery was a highly sought-after trade item. Archaeologists have found Mesa Verde pottery hundreds of miles away, in communities with entirely different local styles. This tells us that its quality and beauty were recognized and valued far beyond its original home. But it wasn't just pottery that traveled. Traders also carried other valuable materials. Think of turquoise, a stone sacred to the Pueblo people. It was mined in places like modern-day New Mexico and Arizona and traded extensively throughout the region and, even further, reaching as far as central Mexico. In return, people in the Four Corners area received goods they couldn't produce themselves. Seashells from the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of California, used for jewelry and ceremonies, were highly prized. Macaw and parrot feathers from the tropics were another luxury item, their bright colors used in ceremonial regalia. These trade routes did more than just move goods. They moved knowledge. As traders traveled from one village to another, they shared stories, technologies, and artistic styles. A potter in one region might see a new design on a traded pot and incorporate it into her own work, creating a new hybrid style. The knowledge of how to create a certain pigment or a specific firing technique could be passed along these networks. This exchange of ideas led to a dynamic and ever-evolving artistic landscape. It shows that the ancestral Puebloan world was not a collection of isolated villages, but a deeply interconnected society where craftsmanship and creativity were constantly being shared, celebrated, and transformed. The skill of one artisan could inspire dozens of others across hundreds of miles. In conclusion, the artistry of the ancestral Puebloans is a profound window into their world. Their black-on-white pottery transforms a simple clay vessel into a canvas of stunning geometric beauty. Their rock art turns silent cliffs into vibrant storyboards of their spiritual beliefs, daily lives, and cosmic understanding. And through their intricate trade networks, this skilled craftsmanship became a shared language that connected communities across the vast Southwest. The legacy of these artists is not just the objects they left behind, but the spirit of creativity, precision, and deep cultural meaning they embedded in everything they made. It's a powerful reminder that art is not a luxury, but a fundamental part of the human experience. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into ancestral Puebloan artistry. It's truly inspiring to see how creativity flourished in this ancient culture. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue exploring this fascinating history with us, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more content just like this. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Welcome back, history lovers. Today, we're diving deep into the ancient American Southwest, but we're not just looking at one place. We're exploring a vast, interconnected world, a web of trade and culture that span deserts, canyons, and mountains. Our journey starts at Mesa Verde, famous for its incredible cliff dwellings, but the story of its people is much bigger than just these amazing homes. They weren't isolated. They were part of a vibrant network that connected them to communities hundreds of miles away. Think of it like an ancient internet, but instead of data, they were sharing goods, ideas, and traditions. So, how do we know this? The evidence is literally etched in stone and buried in the earth. Archaeologists have found items at Mesa Verde that simply don't belong there naturally. These aren't just random objects. They're clues that tell a story of long-distance travel and trade. It is like finding a box of Swiss chocolates in a small town in Japan. There is a story of how it got there. The people of Mesa Verde were connected to some of the biggest cultural centers of their time. Places like the magnificent Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, the Kayenta region in Arizona, the Hohokam people to the south, and the artistic Mimbres culture. Let's start with Chaco Canyon, the undisputed superstar of the ancient Southwest. Chaco was a massive political and religious hub, and its influence was felt all over. The great houses of Chaco, like Pueblo Bonito, were engineering marvels. But they also needed resources, and Mesa Verde had something Chaco wanted: timber. The massive logs used to build the roofs and floors of Chaco's great houses came from forests far away, including mountains near the Mesa Verde region. In return, the people of Mesa Verde received goods and, perhaps more importantly, cultural influence from Chaco. We see this in their pottery styles and architecture. It was a classic trade relationship, a partnership that benefited both sides and helped shape their societies. Now let's look west, towards the Kayenta region in northern Arizona. The connection here is especially clear when we look at pottery. Kayenta artisans were famous for their beautiful black-on-white and polychrome pottery with intricate designs. And guess what? We find large quantities of this distinctive Kayenta pottery at Mesa Verde sites. This wasn't just a few pots traded between neighbors. The volume suggests a steady, well-established trade route. It tells us that these two groups were in constant contact. Imagine caravans of traders making the difficult journey, carrying these fragile but valuable pots, creating a bond between their communities that lasted for generations. They were sharing not just goods, but art and identity. But the trade routes stretched even further south, into the hot deserts of what is now southern Arizona, the land of the Hohokam. The Hohokam were master irrigators, creating vast canal systems to farm the desert. They were also plugged into trade networks that reached all the way to the Pacific Ocean. How do we know? Because we find seashells, beautiful, exotic shells from the Gulf of California and the Pacific coast, at sites all across the Southwest, including Mesa Verde. For people living hundreds of miles inland, these shells were incredibly precious. They were used to make stunning jewelry, ornaments, and religious items. A tiny shell was a symbol of wealth, status, and a connection to a distant, watery world. The journey of that one shell from the ocean, through Hohokam hands, and finally to a cliff dwelling in Mesa Verde, is an epic story of ancient commerce. And the connections don't stop there. Let's talk about the Mimbres people of southwestern New Mexico. The Mimbres are famous for their unique black-on-white pottery, decorated with incredible images of animals, people, and geometric patterns. Their art is so expressive and imaginative. Finding pieces of Mimbres pottery at Mesa Verde is another piece of the puzzle. It shows that the web of trade was complex and multi-directional. It wasn't just one big highway. It was a series of interconnected paths, linking dozens of different cultures, each with its own unique contributions. The Mimbres brought their artistic vision into this network, sharing a piece of their worldview with people they might never have met in person. Now let's talk about some of the most sought-after luxury goods that moved along these ancient highways. First up, turquoise. Turquoise was the gold of the ancient Southwest. This beautiful blue-green stone was mined in various locations, including areas near Chaco Canyon. It was highly prized for its beauty and its spiritual significance. It was crafted into exquisite jewelry, inlaid into objects, and used in ceremonies. Turquoise from these mines has been found all over the Southwest, including Mesa Verde, and even far into Mexico. It was a major currency of its day, a driver of the economy that connected countless communities. The desire for turquoise fueled exploration and maintained these critical trade relationships. And speaking of Mexico, the connection goes even deeper. One of the most astonishing finds at sites like Chaco Canyon and even further north are the remains of scarlet macaws. These are brightly colored parrots native to the tropical forests of southern Mexico, thousands of miles away. They can't survive the cold winters of the Southwest on their own. The fact that we find their skeletons, and even pens where they were kept, tells us there was an incredibly sophisticated long-distance trade network in place. These birds and their vibrant feathers were immensely valuable, likely used in powerful religious ceremonies. Bringing live parrots all that way was a massive undertaking, a true testament to how connected the world was. Mesa Verde was a participant in this continental network, a link in a chain that reached from the Rocky Mountains to the jungles of Mesoamerica. Finally, we can't forget obsidian. Obsidian is a type of volcanic glass that, when fractured, creates an edge sharper than a surgical scalpel. It was the best material available for making razor-sharp arrowheads, knives, and other tools. But obsidian is only found in specific volcanic locations. By analyzing the chemical signature of an obsidian artifact, archaeologists can pinpoint the exact volcano it came from. It's like a geological fingerprint. Obsidian from sources in New Mexico and Utah has been found at Mesa Verde, showing again that people were part of this resource-sharing network. They knew where to get the best materials, and they had the social connections to trade for them. So, when we look at a place like Mesa Verde, we can't see it in isolation. We have to see it as a bustling node in a massive network. The shells from the Pacific, the parrots from Mexico, the turquoise from New Mexico mines, and the pottery from neighboring cultures all tell the same story. The ancient Southwest was a connected world. These trade routes were the lifelines of culture, carrying not just goods, but ideas, beliefs, and innovations across a vast and challenging landscape. The people of Mesa Verde were skilled farmers and builders, but they were also savvy traders and well-connected citizens of a thriving international community. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the ancient trade routes of the Southwest. It's incredible to think about how these connections shaped the lives of the people who lived here so long ago. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other ancient mysteries you'd like to explore. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into history. Today, we're jumping into a fascinating and challenging period, the 1200s. We often think of history in terms of big battles and famous rulers, but what about the silent, creeping changes that can bring a civilization to its knees? In this chapter, we're exploring a time when environmental stress began to mount, setting the stage for major societal shifts. We're going to look at how archaeologists, like detectives of the past, piece together this story of struggle and adaptation. So, how do we know what was happening to the environment 800 years ago? One of the most powerful tools we have is dendrochronology, which is just a fancy word for studying tree rings. Trees are incredible record keepers. In a good rainy year, a tree grows a lot, creating a wide growth ring. But in a year of drought, the ring is very narrow. By analyzing ancient wood, like the beams from old buildings or preserved logs, scientists can create a timeline of rainfall going back centuries. And what the tree rings from the American Southwest, for example, show us for the 1200s is a pattern of prolonged severe droughts. We're not talking about 1 or 2 dry years, but decade-long periods where the rains just didn't come as expected. Imagine being a farmer and facing that kind of uncertainty year after year. This isn't just a weather report from the past. It's the backdrop for everything else that was happening. With less rain comes another big problem: declining crop yields. For societies that relied on agriculture, like the Ancestral Pueblo people, this was a direct threat to their survival. Their primary crops were corn, beans, and squash, all of which need a certain amount of water to thrive. So how do archaeologists see this decline in the dirt? One way is by analyzing pollen. We can take soil samples from ancient farm fields and see what kinds of plants were growing. During this period, we see a decrease in corn pollen and an increase in the pollen of hardier, drought-resistant wild plants like chenopodium and amaranth. This suggests people were struggling to grow their staple crops and were forced to rely more on wild, foraged foods. Another clue comes from the corn itself. Archaeologists have found cobs of corn from this era, and they are noticeably smaller, with fewer kernels. This is a direct physical sign of agricultural stress. The plants just weren't getting enough water and nutrients to produce the big, healthy ears of corn they once did. Think about it. Smaller cobs mean less food per plant, which means you have to work harder and plant more just to get the same amount of food as your grandparents did. It's a classic case of diminishing returns, and it puts immense pressure on a community. Now let's add another layer to this growing crisis: population pressure. It might seem counterintuitive. If there's less food, wouldn't the population decline? Well, not immediately. Before the major droughts really hit their peak, populations in many areas had been growing. People had established large, successful villages. So you have more mouths to feed, right at the moment when the food supply is becoming less reliable. Archaeologists see this pressure in the settlement patterns. We see villages becoming larger and more concentrated. People were clustering together, perhaps for safety or to pool labor for more intensive farming techniques, like building irrigation canals and check dams to capture every precious drop of water. We also see evidence of expansion into more marginal lands. These are areas that you wouldn't normally choose to farm. They might be on steeper slopes, have poorer soil, or be further from a reliable water source. When you see people starting to farm in these less than ideal spots, it's a huge red flag that the prime agricultural land is either overused or no longer productive, and that people are getting desperate. They're pushing the limits of their territory just to try and make ends meet. This combination of a growing population and a shrinking resource base is a recipe for serious social tension. So you have less food coming in and more people to feed. The next logical problem is food storage. In good times, you de-harvest your crops and store the surplus in granaries to get you through the winter and to have seeds for the next planting season. But what happens when there is no surplus? Archaeologists have excavated countless storage pits and structures from this period. What's interesting is not just their existence, but their location and design. We start to see a shift. Instead of simple storage pits within a family home, we see the construction of granaries in highly defensible, hard-to-reach places like high up on cliff ledges. Why would they do this? The most logical explanation is to protect the food, not just from rodents, but from other people. When food is scarce, it becomes incredibly valuable, and the risk of theft and raiding goes up. Placing a community's precious food stores in a location that is difficult to access is a form of security. It suggests that trust was eroding and that communities were becoming more defensive. We also find that many of these late-period storage structures are found empty, or with only trace amounts of food, a silent testament to the fact that the harvests were so poor that there was nothing left to store. They had the infrastructure for surplus, but the climate was no longer cooperating to fill it. It's crucial to understand that this wasn't an overnight catastrophe. This environmental stress was a slow burn, building over decades. A generation might be born into a period of drought, and for them it was just normal. They would hear stories from the elders about a time when the rains were plentiful and the corn grew tall, but their reality was one of struggle. This slow, grinding pressure changes a society from the inside out. It tests social bonds, it forces innovation, but it also creates an undercurrent of anxiety and instability. Think of it like a pot of water slowly being heated. For a long time, nothing seems to be happening. But the temperature is rising, and eventually it reaches a boiling point. The droughts of the 1200s were that slow heating process. People adapted as best they could. They built water control features, they diversified their food sources, they moved their villages. But each adaptation had its limits. Each solution was a temporary fix for a problem that was fundamentally out of their control. The evidence left behind, the narrow tree rings, the tiny corn cobs, the farming on marginal lands, and the hidden granaries all come together to tell a powerful story. It's a story of resilience, ingenuity, and ultimately, the immense challenge of living in a world where the environment you depend on is fundamentally changing beneath your feet. This chapter in history serves as a powerful reminder of how closely human societies are tied to their environment. It shows us how climate change, even on a regional scale, can be a primary driver of major historical events, including migration and societal collapse, which are topics we'll explore next. The archaeology of the 1200s doesn't just show us hardship. It shows us people trying to solve an existential problem with the tools and knowledge they had. It's a deeply human story written in the landscape itself. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the past. I hope this gave you a new perspective on how we can read the story of a changing climate in the archaeological record. If you found this interesting, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through human history. Today, we're diving into Chapter 14, a period marked by dramatic social change, rising community tension, and major shifts in power. As societies grew more complex, life wasn't always peaceful. Let's explore the evidence that tells a story of conflict and reorganization. Imagine a world where your village, once open and sprawling, now needs walls. Across various ancient cultures, we see a fascinating and telling trend: the rise of fortifications. Archaeologists have unearthed massive stone walls, deep ditches, and strategically placed palisades. These weren't just for decoration. They were serious defensive structures. Take, for example, the hill forts of Iron Age Europe. Communities moved to high, naturally defensible locations and then reinforced them with earthworks and wooden barriers. Why go to all this trouble? The simple answer is fear. These fortifications are silent witnesses to a time tea was no longer safe to be exposed. The very design of these structures gives us clues about the nature of the threat. Gateways, for instance, often became incredibly elaborate. Instead of a simple opening, you'd find complex, staggered entrances designed to slow down attackers and expose them to defenders' vantage points. We see guard towers, bastions of Fido protrude from the main wall to provide covering fire, and even secondary inner walls. This is military architecture, on a deep understanding of siege tactics. The labor required to build these defenses was immense, involving Chunga community. This tells us the threat was real, persistent, and significant enough to justify this enormous collective effort. But it's not just walls that tell this story. Within settlements, we see a reorganization of space. Houses start to cluster together, streets become narrower, and the entire layout becomes more compact. People were literally moving into tighter, more defensible spaces. This shift suggests a need for mutual protection and a change in social dynamics. Instead of individual farmsteads spread across the landscape, we see the emergence of larger, nucleated villages. It's a classic safety in numbers strategy. This consolidation often meant abandoning ancestral lands, a decision no community would take lightly. The artifacts we find also hint at conflict. An increase in the production and discovery of weapons like spearheads, arrowheads, and swords is a clear indicator. But sometimes the evidence is more direct and grim. Mass graves, skeletons with unhealed wounds from weapons, and evidence of settlements being burned to the ground paint a vivid picture of violent events. At sites like Maiden Castle in England, archaeologists found a war cemetery with bodies showing brutal injuries, believed to be from the Roman invasion. These discoveries are a somber reminder that shifts in power were often accomplished through force. So, what was driving all this tension? It was likely a combination of factors. Population growth accessorios to increased competition for land, water, and food. As some groups became more successful, they accumulated wealth, which made them a target for raids. The emergence of more hierarchical societies with powerful chiefs or elites could also fuel conflict, as Jisya leaders vied for control and prestige. Climate change, leading to drought or famine, could have also pushed desperate groups to raid their more fortunate neighbors. It was a complex web of social, economic, and environmental pressures. The merging of smaller hamlets into larger fortified villages also had profound social consequences. It created new, larger social units. Living padros' close proximity with more people required new rules, new forms of governance, and new ways of resolving disputes. This is where we start to see the early seeds of more centralized political power. A strong leader might be needed to organize the defense, manage resources, and lead warriors in battle. In this way, Dassault threats ironically helped to forge stronger, more cohesive, and more complex societies. This period of tension also spurred innovation. The need for better defenses led to advancements in engineering and architecture. The constant threat of warfare accelerated the development of new weapons and military tactics. Socially, it forced communities to develop more sophisticated systems of organization and leadership. It was a trial by fire, and the societies that survived were the ones that adapted most effectively. They became more resilient, more organized, and in many cases more powerful. This reorganization wasn't a uniform process. In some regions, we see a cycle of fortification, abandonment, and reoccupation, suggesting a long period of instability. In others, a large, powerful center might emerge and dominate its neighbors, creating a brief period of enforced peace, what some call a pax romana, on a smaller scale. The archaeological record shows a dynamic and often turbulent landscape where fortunes could change. The very act of building a massive wall or reorganizing a village was a powerful statement. It was a physical manifestation of a community's identity and its determination to survive. These structures weren't just practical, they were also symbolic. They marked a clear boundary between us and them, reinforcing a sense of collective identity in the face of external threats. This era of conflict and defense fundamentally reshaped not just the physical landscape but the social and political landscapes as well, setting the stage for the rise of the states and empires that would come to define the next chapter of human history. So, as we look at the remains of ancient walls and the dense layouts of old villages, we're not just seeing stones and dirt. We're re-seeing the story of our ancestors grappling with some of humanity's most enduring challenges: how to live together, how to protect one another, and how to navigate a world of shifting power and constant change. It's a powerful lesson from the past that still resonates today. Thanks for watching. If you found this exploration of ancient social change fascinating, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. See you next time. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the rain just stopped for a year? 5 years? How about 25 years? That's not the plot of a disaster movie. It's a true story from the American Southwest, a period known as the Great Drought. Let us journey back to the late 13th century and uncover how a massive climate shift changed the course of history for the ancestral Puebloan people. Imagine a scientist, deep in a remote canyon, carefully taking a core sample from an ancient gnarled tree. This isn't just any piece of wood, it's a history book. The rings of a tree tell a story of wet years and dry years. Wide rings mean plenty of rain and good growth. Narrow rings? That means struggle, thirst, and drought. When scientists looked at tree rings from the period between 1275 and 1299 CE, they found something shocking. Not just 1 or 2 narrow rings, but a dense, suffocating band of 25 incredibly thin rings, year after year. This wasn't just a dry spell. This was a megadrought, an unrelenting, generation-spanning catastrophe. It was one of the most severe droughts to hit North America in the last 1,000 years. The tree ring data from across the Four Corners region, where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah meet, all told the same grim story. The evidence was undeniable. The skies had closed for business. For the ancestral Pueblo people who had built thriving communities in this region for centuries, this was an existential crisis. Their entire civilization was built on a delicate balance with the environment, a balance that was now shattered. Their primary crop, maize or corn, is a thirsty plant. In a good year, with summer monsoons, the fields would be green and the harvest plentiful. But as the drought took hold, the rains failed. Year after year, the corn stalks withered and died. The once reliable rhythm of planting and harvesting was broken. Imagine the desperation. Food stores, carefully preserved for a lean year or two, began to run out. Granaries that were once overflowing became empty. The people would have tried everything. They would have prayed to their deities, performed ancient ceremonies, and looked to the sky for any sign of a cloud. But the sun beat down and the earth cracked. Hunger wasn't just a threat. It became a constant companion. Archaeologists have found evidence of severe malnutrition in the skeletal remains from this period. The people were starving. And it wasn't just food. The most basic necessity of life, water, became dangerously scarce. The springs and streams that had nourished their villages for generations began to trickle, then dry up completely. People would have had to travel farther and farther into deeper and more dangerous canyons just to find a few precious drops. Rivalries over water sources, which might have been minor disputes before, likely intensified into serious conflicts. Every drop was life. The landscape itself began to change. The pinyon juniper forests that covered the mesas and canyons began to die off. These forests weren't just scenery. They were a vital resource. They provided wood for building their incredible cliff dwellings and kivas. They provided fuel for cooking and for firing pottery. And they were a source of food. Pinyon nuts were a critical part of their diet, a rich source of protein and fat. As the trees died, these resources vanished. The world that had sustained them was turning into a barren wasteland. Life in the villages became unsustainable. Imagine living in one of the famous cliff dwellings like those at Mesa Verde. These were marvels of engineering, secure and defensible. But what good is a fortress if there's no food or water inside? Social structures that had been stable for centuries began to fray. The stress was immense. What do you do when your home, your entire world, can no longer support you? This relentless pressure forced people to make an impossible choice: stay and perish, or leave everything behind and search for a new beginning. We see the evidence of this in the archaeological record. Around the year 1300, these magnificent, bustling settlements across the Four Corners region were abandoned. It wasn't a single, sudden event. It was a gradual exodus, a wave of human migration driven by desperation. Entire communities packed what little they could carry and walked away from the homes their ancestors had built. They didn't just vanish, of course. They sought new options. They moved south and east, towards river valleys like the Rio Grande in present-day New Mexico and the Little Colorado River in Arizona. These areas offered a more reliable, if not perfect, water source. This migration was a massive social upheaval. New communities were formed, often by groups of people from different, now abandoned villages. They had to learn to live together, to share resources, and to build new societies from the ashes of the old ones. This period of migration and reorganization gave rise to the Pueblo cultures we know today, the Hopi, Zuni, and the Rio Grande Pueblos. They carry the legacy of their ancestors. Their oral histories often speak of long journeys and a search for a new home, stories that echo the archaeological evidence of the Great Drought. The crisis forged a new identity. New social structures, new religious practices, and new agricultural techniques emerged, all adapted to a world that was forever changed. The story of the Great Drought is a powerful reminder of how vulnerable civilizations can be to climate change. The ancestral Puebloans were brilliant engineers, skilled farmers, and had a deep understanding of their environment. Yet they were pushed to their absolute limit by forces of nature beyond their control. Their story isn't one of failure but of incredible resilience. They faced a catastrophe and they adapted. They left their homes, but they didn't disappear. They transformed. By studying the silent testimony of tree rings, we've been able to piece together this dramatic chapter of human history. It's a sobering tale of hardship and loss, but also a profound story of survival, adaptation, and the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. It shows us that when faced with a crisis that makes the old ways of life impossible, communities will seek new options, forging new paths to survive. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into our incredible past. Let me know in the comments what other historical mysteries you'd like to explore. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through time. Today, we're exploring the final years of the ancestral Puebloans in their magnificent cliff dwellings, a period between roughly 1280 and 1300 CE. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual, poignant end to a way of life that had flourished for centuries. Imagine standing on a balcony at Cliff Palace, the sun setting over the canyon. For generations, this view meant security, community, and abundance. But now, a sense of unease hangs in the air, as tangible as the winter chill. The fields that once yielded bountiful harvests of corn, beans, and squash are starting to fail. The rains, once reliable, have become erratic. A prolonged drought, what we now call the Great Drought, has gripped the land for over 2 decades. Each year, the harvest is a little smaller, the stored corn a little less plentiful. The people, master farmers who understood this land intimately, try everything. They build new check dams to capture every drop of water. They clear new fields in sheltered alcoves. But the dry, cracked earth offers less and less. The faces of the elders are etched with worry as they look upon the thinning stalks of corn. The children, once plump and energetic, are a little leaner. Hunger, once a distant threat, is now a frequent, unwelcome guest in the stone houses. Looking out from the cliffs, another troubling sign appears on the horizon: plumes of smoke. Not the familiar smoke from a neighboring village's cooking fire, but the thick, dark smoke of conflict. While the communities of Mesa Verde seem to have been relatively peaceful, the pressures of drought and scarcity were likely fanning the flames of tension across the region. These distant smokes are a constant, unsettling reminder that the world beyond their protected canyons is changing, becoming more dangerous. The sense of isolation that once meant safety now feels more like vulnerability. Back within the village, the strain is visible everywhere. The resources that were once abundant are now scarce. The forests on the mesa top have been thinned for firewood and building timbers. The game animals, the deer and bighorn sheep that provided meat and hides, have become harder to find, pushed out by the changing climate and overhunting. The potters find that the best clay deposits are depleted, and the weavers have to travel farther to find yucca for their sandals and baskets. Every aspect of daily life now requires more effort for less return. Life has become a constant calculation of conservation and survival. Walking through the plazas of Cliff Palace or Longhouse, you'd notice a new kind of silence. Certain doorways are sealed with carefully placed stones. These are not signs of sudden departure, but a family is making a difficult choice. A family might move to join relatives in another part of the village where resources are slightly better, or they might decide to leave the mesa altogether, sealing their home as they depart. These abandoned rooms are like missing teeth in the smile of the community. Each sealed doorway represents a family gone, voices silenced, stories interrupted. The village, once bustling with over 100 people, now feels emptier, the echoes of children's laughter fainter in the plazas. The movement is not a chaotic exodus, but a planned migration. Families and clans, after much deliberation, decide their future lies elsewhere. They pack what they can carry, seeds for the next planting, precious turquoise and pottery, and the tools they will need to build a new life. They look for the last time at the homes their ancestors built, the kivas where they prayed, the walls painted with the symbols of their clan. It is a departure filled with sorrow, but also with hope for a better future to the south, near the Rio Grande or the Little Colorado River, where the rains are said to be returning. Yet, even in these twilight years, the spirit of the community endures. In fact, it might have been stronger than ever. Faced with hardship, the people turn to each other and to their traditions. The remaining families share their meager harvests, ensuring that no one starves alone. The rhythmic sound of grinding corn on the metates continues, a steady beat of resilience against the quiet desperation. The fires in the kivas burn brightly. Now, more than ever, the ancient rituals are vital. The clan leaders and spiritual elders gather in these sacred subterranean chambers, their chants and prayers rising with the smoke through the saipapu, pleading with the spirits for rain, for health, for guidance. These ceremonies are the glue holding the society together. They reaffirm their connection to the land, to their ancestors, and to each other. The solstice and equinox are still marked with precision, the celestial cycles a source of stability in a world of uncertainty. The creation of beautiful black-on-white pottery continues, the intricate designs a testament to an identity that refuses to be erased by hardship. The stories of the people, the epic tales of their emergence into this world, and their journey through the landscape, are told with renewed urgency, passed down to the younger generation as a source of strength and continuity. They are not just surviving. They are living, maintaining their cultural heart even as their world shrinks. The final departure, when it comes around the year 1300, is not a flight of panic. It is the last, carefully considered step in a long process. The people leave their homes in order, sweeping the floors one last time, leaving behind pots and tools they cannot carry, perhaps as an offering to the home that sheltered them. They walk out of the canyons and into the pages of history, not as a vanished people, but as migrants carrying their culture with them. The cliff dwellings fall silent, but they are not empty. They are filled with the echoes of a resilient people who, until the very end, faced the unknown with courage, community, and an unwavering faith in their traditions. The stone walls hold their memory, a powerful story of human endurance against the greatest of challenges. Thanks for watching. If you found this glimpse into the past as moving as I did, please like this video and subscribe for more stories etched in stone. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through the history of the ancestral Puebloans. Today, we tackle one of the most enduring mysteries of the American Southwest. Why did the people of Mesa Verde leave their spectacular cliff dwellings? The answer, as revealed by archaeology, is far from the dramatic collapse many imagine. Instead, it's a story of a slow, deliberate, and remarkably peaceful migration. By the late 1200s, Mesa Verde was a thriving center of culture and community. Thousands of people lived in intricate cliff dwellings and on the mesa tops. They farmed, held ceremonies, and raised their families. But within just a few decades, by the year 1300, this vibrant society had emptied out. The stone cities fell silent. For centuries, the question has been, what happened? Was it a devastating war? A catastrophic plague? The evidence left behind tells a different story. Archaeologists have meticulously examined these sites, and what they found is astounding. There are no signs of a widespread, violent conflict. We don't see burned villages, mass graves, or a chaotic, panicked flight. The walls of the cliff dwellings weren't torn down. Instead, the scene is one of an orderly departure. It's as if an entire community collectively decided it was time to move on, and they did so with care and intention. Let's look closer at the clues. In many of the rooms, archaeologists found doorways neatly sealed with adobe mortar and stones. These weren't hasty barricades. They were carefully constructed closures. It's like they were tucking their homes away, perhaps with the thought of one day returning, or simply showing respect for the home they were leaving behind. They were closing a chapter, not slamming the door. Inside these sealed rooms, we find hearths that were swept clean, storage bins were empty. The floors were clear of the usual debris of daily life. This isn't what you'd expect from a population fleeing in terror. A hurried escape leaves behind a mess pots, tools, food, all the things you can't carry. But here, the people took their most important belongings with them. They packed up their essential tools, their precious pottery, their warm blankets, and ceremonial items. They carried what they could, preparing for a long journey to a new home. Think about what this means. This was not a single event, but a gradual process. It likely happened over a generation or two. Family by family, clan by clan, they made the decision to leave. Imagine the conversations that must have taken place. Elders discussing the changing climate, parents explaining to their children that they would be journeying to a new land. It was a migration, not an evacuation. Even the sacred spaces, the kivas, were treated with reverence. Many kivas were found with their wooden roof beams intentionally removed, and the structures were then purposefully filled with earth. This wasn't destruction. It was a ritual decommissioning. It was a way of respectfully closing a sacred space, putting it to rest before they departed. It's an act that speaks volumes about their worldview, a belief that the spiritual power of a place needed to be handled with care, even when leaving it behind. So, if it wasn't war or a sudden disaster, what prompted this great migration? The primary driver, most researchers agree, was environmental. The Great Drought, which began around 1276 and lasted for over 2 decades, was one of the most severe in 1,000 years. For a society entirely dependent on agriculture, this was a catastrophe in slow motion. Year after year, the rains failed. The corn, bean, and squash crops withered in the fields. The springs that provided their drinking water began to dry up. We can see the evidence in the tree rings, which show incredibly narrow growth during this period, a clear sign of extreme drought. Life in the arid landscape of Mesa Verde, always a challenge, became nearly impossible. The drought didn't just affect the food supply. It would have created immense social stress. When resources become scarce, tensions can rise. While we don't see evidence of large-scale warfare, there might have been localized conflicts or disputes over the last remaining pockets of water and fertile land. Archaeologists have found some signs of social strain, like a few unburied bodies and defensive structures built in the final years, suggesting that life was becoming more precarious. Faced with failing crops and dwindling water, moving was the only logical solution. It was a survival strategy. And the ancestral Puebloans were no strangers to migration. Their ancestors had moved for generations, adapting to the shifting opportunities and challenges of the Southwest. This departure was simply the largest and most final one from the Mesa Verde region. But where did they go? They weren't moving into an empty void. They were moving toward regions where other Pueblo people were already living, places with more reliable water sources. Archaeological and cultural evidence shows that the people of Mesa Verde migrated south and southeast. They traveled to the Rio Grande Valley in present-day New Mexico and to the Hopi Mesas and Zuni territory in Arizona. This wasn't a journey into the unknown. They likely had connections to these areas through trade and kinship. Messengers and scouting parties would have returned with news of better watered lands and welcoming communities. The migration was probably a phased movement, with families joining relatives who had already established themselves in these new homes. The legacy of the Mesa Verde people didn't vanish. It transformed. Their skills, their traditions, and their very DNA were integrated into the Pueblo communities of the South. Today, the modern Pueblo people of New Mexico and Arizona consider the inhabitants of Mesa Verde their ancestors. Their oral histories often speak of these migrations, telling stories of journeys from a former home in the north. The pottery styles, architectural techniques, and religious practices of Mesa Verde can be seen influencing the cultures they joined. So the story of Mesa Verde's depopulation is not one of a lost civilization that mysteriously disappeared. It's a powerful story of resilience, adaptation, and the incredible strength of a community facing unimaginable hardship. They didn't vanish. They'd packed their bags, said a respectful goodbye to their ancestral homes, and walked toward a new future. They made a calculated, difficult choice to ensure the survival of their people and their culture. The silent cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde are not a tomb, but a monument to a journey, a testament to a people who carried their world with them. Thank you for joining us for this chapter. The story of the Pueblo people is a testament to their enduring connection to this land. If you found this interesting, please like, subscribe, and join us next time as we explore the vibrant cultures they built in their new homes. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the history of the Pueblo people. In our last episode, we explored the great abandonment of the Mesa Verde region, a monumental shift that left behind incredible cliff dwellings. But this wasn't an end. It was a new beginning. So, where did they go? Today, we're following the ancestral Pueblo people on their great journey south, into the lands that would become their new homes. This is Chapter 18, The Pueblo Journey South. Imagine, after centuries of living in one area, your community decides to move. Not just a few families, but thousands of people, carrying with them their culture, their knowledge, and their hopes for the future. Between the late 1200s and early 1300s, this was the reality for the people of the Four Corners region. They didn't just vanish. They embarked on a series of migrations, following ancient pathways and spiritual guidance to new lands. Archaeological evidence, combined with the rich oral traditions of their descendants, paints a vivid picture of these journeys. The people moved in different directions, drawn by kinship, resources, and prophecy. Three major destinations emerged as centers of Pueblo life: the Rio Grande Valley in present-day New Mexico, the high mesas of the Hopi in Arizona, and the Zuni homelands, also in New Mexico. Let's first travel to the Rio Grande Valley. This was a massive draw for many migrating groups. The river provided a reliable, year-round source of water for drinking and for agriculture, a critical resource in the arid Southwest. As people moved south and east, they established new villages, or pueblos, all along the Rio Grande and its tributaries. These weren't small, temporary camps. They were large, planned communities, some housing thousands of people. The architecture here evolved. While the fundamental concepts of stone and adobe construction continued, the style adapted. Instead of building into cliff alcoves, they built large, multi-story apartment-like structures on the valley floor or on low mesas. Pueblos like Qua, near present-day Bernalillo, or Pashwanj near the Chama River, showcased this new style. They were often arranged around central plazas, which became the heart of community and ceremonial life, just as the kivas had been in the north. This plaza-oriented layout is a hallmark of Rio Grande Pueblos that you can still see today. The influx of so many people also created an incredible cultural fusion. Migrants from different northern communities brought their unique pottery styles, their clan histories, and their ceremonial practices. In the Rio Grande Valley, these different traditions blended. We see the emergence of new, distinct pottery types. For example, the beautiful glazeware pottery became prominent during this period. These pots, decorated with lead-based paints that turned glassy and vibrant when fired, were not only beautiful, but were also traded extensively, connecting the different pueblos along the river. The designs on this pottery often carried symbolic meanings related to water, fertility, and the cosmos, continuing ancient visual languages in a new form. Now let's turn our attention westward, to the high windswept mesas of northeastern Arizona. This area became the home of the Hopi. The name Hopi itself means the peaceful people. Oral traditions say that the clans who would become the Hopi were instructed by the spiritual being Maso to travel to different lands before settling at their destined home. When they arrived at the mesas, they found a place that was defensible, remote, and spiritually significant. Life on the Hopi Mesas required incredible resilience and knowledge of dry farming. Unlike the Rio Grande, there were no permanent rivers. The Hopi perfected techniques to grow corn, beans, and squash using rainfall and runoff. Their connection to the land and to the cycles of weather became central to their existence. The villages they built, like Oraibi, which is considered one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in North America, were perched atop the mesas. This provided security and a commanding view of their cornfields below. The architectural style here also continued the traditions of stone masonry, with multi-story homes built right up against each other, creating a dense, communal living space. The kivas, the sacred ceremonial chambers, remained a vital part of every village, built semi-subterraneanly as they had been for centuries. Hopi culture today is a powerful testament to this continuity. The clan system, the intricate Katsina belief system, and the rich cycle of ceremonies that mark the year are all direct inheritances from their ancestors who made that journey south. Their pottery, particularly the beautiful yellowware that emerged around the 1300s, showcases unique designs and firing techniques that set it apart. The symbols and patterns on this pottery aren't just decorative. They tell stories of clans, migrations, and cosmology. Finally, let's journey to the Zuni homelands, located between the Rio Grande and Hopi areas. The Zuni people have a unique and deeply rooted history in their region. While they also received migrants from the north, their story is one of both migration and deep local continuity. Their oral traditions speak of a long search for the middle place of the world, a spiritually designated center where they were destined to live. This search culminated in the establishment of the Zuni Pueblo, or Halona, Itawana, the middle ant hill of the world. The Zuni language is a linguistic isolate, meaning it's not related to any other language, which points to their distinct and ancient history in this specific place. When northern migrants arrived, they were integrated into the existing Zuni society. This brought new skills and ideas, but the core of Zuni culture remained strong. Zuni architecture also featured large, multi-story Pueblo blocks. The famous 7 cities of Cibola that the Spanish conquistadors later sought were, in fact, the Zuni villages. Zuni craftsmanship is world-renowned, especially their intricate pottery and their masterful stone and shell inlay jewelry. The pottery traditions that developed after the migration period show a remarkable continuity of symbols and forms, while also innovating with new styles. Ritual and ceremony are the bedrock of Zuni life. Their calendar is filled with religious observances that maintain balance and ensure the well-being of the world. The Shalako ceremony, for instance, is a stunning and complex ritual that involves masked dancers who bless new homes, reenacting parts of the Zuni creation and migration story. So what's the big takeaway here? The end of the Mesa Verde era wasn't a disappearance. It was a diaspora. The Pueblo people took the essence of their culture, their architectural know-how, their farming techniques, their pottery skills, their social structures, and most importantly, their spiritual beliefs, and replanted it in new, fertile ground. In the Rio Grande Valley, Hopi Mesas, and Zuni homelands, these ancient traditions didn't just survive. They evolved, adapted, and blossomed. They fused with local traditions and gave rise to the vibrant and resilient Pueblo cultures that thrive today. The plazas, the pottery, the ceremonies, they are all living links to that incredible journey south. A journey of resilience, faith, and renewal. When you visit a Pueblo community today, whether it's Tuos Pueblo along the Rio Grande, Walpi on First Mesa, or the Zuni Pueblo, you are witnessing the living legacy of a journey that began over 700 years ago. It's a powerful reminder that cultures are not static things locked in the past. They are living, breathing entities that travel, adapt, and endure. Thank you so much for joining me on this leg of our exploration. I hope this gives you a deeper appreciation for the incredible history and continuity of the Pueblo people. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time. Imagine you're a cowboy in the 1870s, riding through the canyons of southwestern Colorado. It's a wild, rugged landscape. Suddenly, you look up and see it tucked into a massive cliff alcove, a silent stone city. This was the reality for the first ranchers and explorers who stumbled upon the incredible cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde. For centuries, these ancient homes had been known only to the Ute people who lived in the region. But in the late 19th century, that all started to change. One of the earliest documented accounts comes from a man named John Moss in 1873. He guided the photographer, William Henry Jackson, into Mancos Canyon. Jackson's stunning photographs were the first to show the American public these mysterious structures. He photographed a dwelling he named Two-Story Cliff House, and the images were a sensation. People were captivated. Who built these cities in the cliffs? Where did they go? It was like discovering a lost world right here in America. Following Jackson, other explorers and geologists, like William H. Holmes from the Hayden Survey, came to map and sketch the ruins. But the story of Mesa Verde's rediscovery is inseparable from one particular family, the Wetherells. The Wetherells were a Quaker family who had a ranch near Mancos. The 5 Wetherell brothers, Richard, Al, John, Clayton, and Win, were cowboys who spent a lot of time exploring the canyons while looking for stray cattle. They were friendly with the Utes, and one Ute man named Akowitz told them stories about the Anasazi, the ancient ones who lived in the cliffs. He even guided them to some of the sites. The Wetherells' most famous discovery came on a snowy day in December 1888. Richard Wetherell and his brother-in-law, Charlie Mason, were riding on the mesa top, searching for lost cattle. As they paused at the edge of a canyon, the blowing snow cleared for a moment. Across the canyon, nestled in a huge south-facing alcove, was a spectacular sight. Richard later described it as a magnificent city. It was the largest cliff dwelling in North America. They named it Cliff Palace. Over the next few days, their excitement grew. They found another massive dwelling, which they named Spruce Tree House because a huge Douglas fir, which they thought was a spruce, grew in front of it. Then they found Square Tower House. It was an astonishing series of discoveries. For the next few years, the Wetherell brothers dedicated themselves to exploring the canyons. They located hundreds of sites, giving them descriptive names that we still use today, like Balcony House and Longhouse. This is where the story gets a bit complicated. The Wetherells weren't trained archaeologists. They were curious, self-taught explorers. They began excavating the sites, collecting pottery, tools, baskets, and other artifacts. They saw it as salvaging these items from the elements and from other pot hunters who were starting to swarm the area. Their intentions were arguably good. They wanted to understand the people who lived there. They meticulously documented many of their finds and gathered one of the first major collections of ancestral Puebloan artifacts. However, their methods were, by today's standards, destructive. They used shovels and picks, and their digging disturbed the layers of history that modern archaeologists use to date sites and understand daily life. They were products of their time, a time before archaeology had become a formal, scientific discipline. They called the people who built the dwellings Anasazi, a Navajo word they learned that is often translated as ancient, enemies. Today, we prefer to use the term Ancestral Puebloans, out of respect for their modern descendants. The Wetherells' collection of artifacts toured cities like Denver and Chicago, even appearing at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. This brought incredible publicity to Mesa Verde, but it also started a gold rush of sorts. The sites were on public land, completely unprotected. Relic hunters and tourists flocked to the mesas. They dug haphazardly, knocking down walls to get to inner rooms and carrying away whatever they could find. They scribbled their names on ancient walls. It was a tragedy. Priceless archaeological information was being destroyed forever. One visitor who was horrified by this destruction was a Swedish scholar named Gustaf Nordenskiöld. He arrived in 1891 and spent the summer with the Wetherells. Unlike the casual pot hunters, Nordenskiöld was a scientist. He brought systematic scientific methods to Mesa Verde. He carefully excavated, mapped the sites, took photographs, and analyzed the artifacts he found. He was the first person to apply rigorous scientific techniques to the study of the cliff dwellings. When he was done, he packed up his collection of several hundred items and shipped them back to Sweden. This caused a huge public outcry. People in Durango were furious that these American treasures were being taken to a foreign country. Nordenskiöld was even briefly arrested. But there were no laws against it. He hadn't broken any rules. His collection eventually went to the National Museum of Finland, and his book, The Cliff Dwellers of the Mesa Verde, became the first scientific study of the sites. While the loss of the artifacts was controversial, his work set a new standard for archaeology in the Southwest. The Nordenskiöld affair, combined with the ongoing looting, was a wake-up call. It became clear that if something wasn't done, there would be nothing left of Mesa Verde to study or preserve. A remarkable woman from Denver named Virginia McClurg took up the cause. She had first visited the ruins in the 1880s and was appalled by the vandalism. She founded the Colorado Cliff Dwellings Association, and for years, she and her group of dedicated women lobbied politicians, wrote articles, and gave lectures. They fought tirelessly to protect the ruins. Their campaign gained momentum. They faced opposition, but their persistence paid off. Their efforts, along with those of scientists and other concerned citizens, led directly to the creation of the Antiquities Act of 1906. This landmark legislation gave the president the authority to declare historic landmarks and other objects of historic or scientific interest as national monuments. And on June 29, 1906, President Theodore Roosevelt used this new power to sign a bill creating Mesa Verde National Park. It was the very first national park created to preserve the works of man. The goal was to protect the amazing legacy of the ancestral Puebloan people for all future generations. So from the first glimpse by a cowboy through the passionate explorations of the Wetherells, to the scientific work of Nordenskjöld and the fierce advocacy of Virginia McClurg, the journey of Mesa Verde's rediscovery was a dramatic chapter in American history. It was a story of wonder, controversy, and ultimately, a groundbreaking effort in preservation that allows us to visit and marvel at these incredible places today. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the past. Welcome back. As we conclude our journey through Mesa Verde, we turn our gaze from the distant past to the vibrant present. What has become of this incredible landscape, and what does it mean to us today? Chapter 20, Mesa Verde Today, Protecting an Ancient Legacy. The sun-bleached sandstone and silent cliff dwellings we see today are not just ruins. They are the heart of a living culture, a testament to a journey that never ended. Preserving this legacy is a monumental task, a delicate dance between conservation science and cultural respect. For decades, the National Park Service has worked tirelessly to stabilize these ancient structures. Imagine archaeologists and engineers suspended on ropes, meticulously injecting specialized mortar into crumbling walls, or using advanced laser scanning to create digital blueprints of entire villages. This technology allows them to monitor every crack, every shift, ensuring that places like Cliff Palace and Balcony House can withstand the forces of time and nature for generations to come. But preservation isn't just about stone and mortar. It's about preserving a story. And that story is carried forward by the descendants of the people who built these homes. Today, 26 federally recognized tribes, including the Hopi, Zuni, and the various Pueblos of New Mexico and Arizona, trace their ancestry directly back to Mesa Verde. For them, this is not an abandoned relic of the past. It is a sacred ancestral homeland. Their involvement is crucial to the park's modern identity. Tribal consultations are a fundamental part of park management. Imagine tribal elders walking through these canyons, sharing knowledge passed down through countless generations. They point to a plant and explain its medicinal use. They look at a symbol carved in stone and recount the ancient story it tells. Their oral histories are not just anecdotes. They are invaluable data, filling in the gaps that archaeology alone cannot. They explain that their ancestors didn't vanish, they migrated. What did they say about that great migration? It wasn't a sudden disappearance or a catastrophic collapse, as early theories suggested. Instead, their traditions speak of a purposeful journey, a spiritual quest guided by prophecy. They speak of a time when the climate shifted, when the springs began to dry up, and the earth could no longer sustain them in the same way. It was time to move on, to find the center place. The migration was a spiritual imperative, a fulfillment of their cultural destiny. They left with ceremony and respect, knowing their spirits would forever be connected to these canyons. They traveled south and east, establishing new communities along the Rio Grande and on the mesas of Arizona. The villages you can visit today, like Acoma Pueblo, perched atop a massive mesa, or Taos Pueblo, with its iconic multi-storied adobe buildings, are the living continuation of Mesa Verde's legacy. The same architectural styles, the same farming techniques, the same ceremonial practices, they all evolve from the foundations laid right here. When you listen to a Pueblo leader speak, you hear the echoes of their ancestors. They talk about the importance of community, of living in balance with the earth, and of the cyclical nature of life. They see their history not as a straight line but as a spiral, always returning to its source. For them, Mesa Verde is a place of memory, reverence, and origin. It's a place they return to for pilgrimage, to honor their ancestors and to renew their connection to the land that shaped them. Ongoing research continues to deepen our understanding. Scientists analyze ancient pollen trapped in a soil core to reconstruct the climate of the 13th century with incredible precision. Archaeologists use non-invasive techniques like ground-penetrating radar to map out undiscovered structures without ever digging into the sacred ground. Geneticists even study the DNA of modern turkey populations to trace their lineage back to the domesticated birds kept by the ancestral Puebloans. Each new discovery adds another layer to the story, often confirming what tribal oral traditions have been saying all along. The science and the traditional knowledge are not in conflict. They are two different languages telling the same epic tale of human resilience, adaptation, and faith. So, as we bring our exploration to a close, let's take a final moment to reflect. Picture a quiet evening in Mesa Verde. The setting sun paints the cliffs in hues of orange and deep purple. The air grows cool and still. The stars, unobscured by city lights, begin to emerge, a brilliant canopy sparkling over the silent dwellings. In this profound peace, you can almost feel the presence of those who came before. This place is more than a national park. It's a library of human experience, a sanctuary of cultural continuity, and a powerful reminder that our connection to the past is never truly broken. The story of Mesa Verde is the story of a people who built a civilization in the cliffs, who listened to the earth, and who embarked on a great journey that continues to this day. It's a story of resilience, of migration, and of the unbreakable thread of culture that weaves through time. And now, as you prepare for sleep, let the peace of these ancient canyons settle over you. Imagine the gentle whisper of the wind through the pinyon and juniper, a sound that has been the lullaby of this land for millennia. Let go of the day's worries and breathe in the tranquility of this timeless place. The resilience of the ancestral Puebloans reminds us that we too can navigate our own journeys, that change is a natural part of life, and that our roots give us strength. May your dreams be peaceful, and may you rest in the quiet wisdom of the mesas. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, sleep well.